Welcome back. So I've taken some time to have a look at my painting and to decide exactly what I want to do. So essentially I've finished the first two stages where I've put in the wash and I've built up and layered up the colours, almost gone into a third stage. And now what I want to try and do is to give a sense of finish to it. I like what I've done. I like the freedom, I like the colour, I like the vibrancy, I like the movement within the painting. So I don't want to overpaint it, and knowing when you've gone as far as you can go in a painting is very important, because it's very easy to tip beyond that point and go into overpainting. And so what I want to try and do is to make sure that I finish it off without losing that lovely sense of immediacy and freedom and freshness, and I want to keep that. You can see that I may actually have to pause for a few minutes because the light is beautifully coming in from the window behind me. It's evening time here and it's a gorgeous, gorgeous evening, but you can see the light is coming in from the sunlight's coming in from the window behind me, and that may interfere with your ability to see what I'm doing. We'll carry on for a few moments and I'll see, and if needs be, sure, if I have to stop, I'll come back to it. Okay, so as I said, I'm going to just try and bring a little bit more clarity to the highlights around the top of the apple here, highlights to the top of the apple there to the left hand side, and a little bit more drama in terms of the light on the background. A little bit of softening of this. I think I've made that I've allowed that to remain too bright, so I'm going to soften them where I've cut out the section here. I've got a little bit of softness up here and the stalk to put in, and then we'll see from there where we go. I'm going to start with just softening little bits of what I have first, because again, you're always trying to find that balance between the feeling of softness and the feeling of strength and harshness, and it's somewhere between the two that you're looking for. And that's something, once again, that you gauge as you go along visually. You don't always know it beforehand. You wait and see what it looks like as you're going along. I'm going to introduce a little bit of redishness, yellowishness around here, because it's reflecting from the outside of the apple. You get that little bit of extra warmth just as it hits the core there, so it graduates into that space. Just tiny little touches. I'll soften up these spaces here just at the top where they come out from the little indentation where the stalk sits out, so that little dip. And these are slightly curved because it shows the crown of the apple. It gets the roundness at the top of the apple into that space. Put a little bit more strength in here just to really bring that up there. And you can see I've been using larger brushes. That's a size 2 and that's a size 4 that I've been using, and this is only a little 10 by 10 canvas. I don't want to be too fiddly, so it's important not to allow the size of the brush is important, because if you use too small a brush, it can force you into being too fiddly, whereas if you use a larger size brush, it doesn't allow you to get too detailed, and that's very important, certainly if you want to paint with a free sense in your painting. You don't want to be too rigid and too perfect. I'm going to take a little bit of the grey, because the background at this point in time is grey. That colour is going to reflect up, so I'm going to just put that in here, so that some of that colour from this space comes back into that area there. I'm going to do the same just around here, just to soften that, give a little bit more gentility to it. There's little bits of soft light just creeping around the outside of the apple to that area. Just take some of that, so I'll just rinse off my brush, keep my yellows fresh, and once more I'm going to take some white and some of the chrome yellow. And just in between these little spaces, I'm using the side of the brush rather than the point of the brush just to get that lovely immediacy, this lovely little dip there. Now, the rule in oil paint is often, or in oil or acrylic paint, is often the lights come forward and the darks recede. And by that, it's often meant that you want to make your lights stand out. You want to get that sense of vibrancy, and so in order to do that, you can put your lights on with a little bit more impasto, or a little bit more heaviness or texture. So your dark colours can be blended in with a certain degree of softness, so they're not too strong and they're not too textured, whereas your lights have a little bit more definition in their texture, and that helps them to stand out and gives a little bit more drama and immediacy and feeling of light coming through. Put a little bit more whiteness in here, get just a little bit of brashness into the centre where I've cut out the apple, and the colour of the centre of the apple is a little bit more vibrant, once again, especially when light hits it. When you have sunlight on your composition, as I had when I put this composition together, it was a beautiful morning. There was a lot of sunlight coming through the window here, and then my ring light in on top of that, so there was a lot of bright light showing through that really enhanced the composition and gave a sense of strength to them, and that's what I want to try and pick up on. Now I need to put out a little bit more white. Oh, wasn't looking and I picked up green. That's not going to help. Now, important to keep your white space clean, and particularly your whites and your yellows or your lighter colours. Otherwise they lose their freshness, and at the moment they lose their freshness, you're somewhat lost when it comes to the vibrancy. And the white that I'm putting in is quite pure, but it's blending with the lower colour I put in earlier on, so I'm getting a lovely subtle softness coming through between the two. And as with my drawing, when I was doing the drawing, you may remember I said when I was rubbing out the colour that I had put in on top of the light areas, I didn't rub it out entirely. I left small amounts of the colour there because I was trying to create the feeling of the texture at the surface of the apple. That light is just beautiful coming in behind us there. It's glorious, glorious evening. Perfect evening for painting. And I left some of that soft pencil in my drawing to get that feeling of texture of the surface of the apple. And I'm doing the same here with my whites and my lights. I'm not painting them in too perfectly so that I get that same feeling coming through. Now I'm just going to soften very gently there so that dip does not feel too harsh or too heavy-handed. And I'm going to take a little bit of yellow and just soften some of those shadowy tones, because where the light hits, it also does have an impact onto the little dips and the shadows in those spaces. Just stepping back a little and give yourself the idea of a little bit more distance to try and understand what you're doing, because if we're standing too close or sitting too close, we don't always see everything as well as we should. So by standing back, you can see everything come together much more singularly, and you get a better feeling of the overall influence of the different elements coming together. I'm going to take some red down into my shadow area here so that the influence of the red reflecting into the shadows picked up on. A little bit here. And I've already, as you can see, put the green over to there earlier on. And you don't need to blend it in too perfectly. Now, I'm going to take one of my small detailing brushes at this stage in order to do the stalk. So I'll take my burnt umber, a little bit of phthalo blue, so I'm looking for something quite dark. And to get the definition, I just, to rest my hand, I put my hand here onto the easel and I rest my other hand on top of that just to hold myself steady to establish the idea of the stalk. Now, I want that to stand out a tiny little bit more, so what I'm going to do is soften the shadow around it slightly to make it stand out a little bit. Now, there are little touches of light onto the apple. I'm going to put those in. Little spots. They're a little soft yellow, so I need to just warm that up a little. Don't want to make them I don't want to make them too harsh. Otherwise they tend to look more like spots or dots rather than actually onto the surface of the apple. And there's a little bit more light here, which I'm going to just pick up on while I have the small brush. That space. Again, all of these lights that you see are reflecting from the background. Take my larger brush and once more with some white and a little bit bright blue. I just put in a little bit of bright light coming through. And I'm coming up to the edge of the apple, but I'm not making too hard a line on it. If you remember when I was doing the drawing of the apple, I was saying to you that the outside line has a certain softness, because the apple, although it's hard, it's not hard like wood. It's slightly squishy, and so to convey that feeling, although keeping the idea of volume, a little bit of softness around the edge helps to bring about that feeling of just that little bit of softness or squishiness. So I'm using the negative space. I'm coming in on the outside, but I'm not creating too harsh a line. I'm leaving a little bit of softness for that effect onto the surface of the apple. Again, keeping the same idea, just tapping in the colours a little bit more dramatically. Now I'm not looking for a smooth surface, I just want to pick up on that feeling of dramatic light. And then of course that little section there that I talked about earlier on. Now I'm looking for a little bit more strength in some of the shadow areas to complement the lights I'm putting in, so I'm just coming in with a little bit more of a deeper violet into this space, and I have it in there. I'm just going to touch up on one or two of those dark shadows as well to make sure I have the requisite sense of darkness into the spaces to balance. I've taken out my palette knife, and I'm just using my palette knife just to give a little bit of softness here and there and a little bit of unevenness at the same time. Just chopping in, using the knife just to give a little bit of difference, I suppose, between the idea of the texture of the fruit and the idea of the background. And it's a nice way of just creating, again, a little bit more contrast in the physical texture and surface of your painting as distinct from just the contrast in colours. So how one applies paint is oftentimes a way to create a little bit more drama or vibrancy into your painting. And I like the feeling of freedom and immediacy that it gives, and it just gives that little bit of extra drama every now and then to what you have. Thinking of just experimenting with a little bit of darkness over on this side, so I'm just going to take, again, the beauty of the painting knife is that it's very easy to put in colour, and if you don't like it, to take it back out. So I'm just going to experiment with a little bit of darkness over here and see what it looks like. And the basic, remember I said earlier, trial and error, see what happens. And the reason I'm doing that is because there's so much light here on the surface of this apple that I feel I need something just to pick up and give a little bit more drama. Putting a little bit of extra bright yellow here because as the light penetrates through, as I said earlier, the apple is not entirely solid. And so, especially when it's sliced open, and so some of the light can penetrate through here and you get that lovely little bit of brightness showing through on the green skin just along the final edge there. And once we, again, it's those, oftentimes it's those tiny little touches that give that extra feeling of drama and realism to what you have. And also just into the core, just a little bit more shadowy greenness into this area showing through. And I see just a little bit more brightness coming through here. And there we have our painting of apples in oil paint. As I said, it's very important that when you're doing yours, that you don't feel you have to be too perfect or too rigid. By all means, copy mine, take an interpretation of mine as I've interpreted the original still life that I set up. If not mine, then set up your own. It can be any piece of fruit or vegetable or an object or a flower, whatever it happens to be. Remember, the most important thing is to have fun, to enjoy yourself, to experiment, to explore, get in touch with your creativity. Don't feel you have to be too perfect. Enjoy the process, the mixing of colour, the application of colour, and the peace and quiet and the gentility that it allows you to have as you're working away. Maybe a little bit of music on in the background, a cup of tea, a cup of coffee to hand. Enjoy it, that's the key thing. And if you do that, then that pretty much is all you need, realistically. And if you keep that process up, then certainly by all means you will learn far more quickly. And of course, I did say that I would show those of you who don't have paints or who are working with simpler materials how to create something similar with using just crayons or markers. So I'm going to do something very, very quick to add in, but just a simple effects just with both crayons and markers, just in case you are trying to do something like this at home. It won't be as involved obviously as oil paint. It'll be much more simplistic, and I'll just take a section and show you something small. I should be back in another day or two with another video to upload. I'm not quite sure yet what I'm going to do. I'll have a little think about that. In the meantime, enjoy your creative adventures, have fun, and I will look forward to seeing you soon. Mind yourselves, take care, see you soon, bye bye.